I got a hold of one of the sculptors that worked there for a little bit of time. He's like, yeah, I didn't really work on much. I was kind of there at the end of the line. I'm like, well, is there anything that you had that was turtles? He's like, yeah, there's only one figure I took because it got canceled really early. And my jaw just dropped. I'm like, I can't believe this thing was sculpted.
I'm Chris Fawcett. I wrote the book Rad Plastic, which is all about the history of the Ninja Turtles. I've always sort of gravitated to the unproduced stuff, which, in the prototype collecting realm, the unproduced stuff is like the top tier. Pretty much most of the unproduced stuff I've found I've kept. There was these known unproduced Warriors of the Forgotten Sewer.
And then here we have the Warriors of the Forgotten Sewer, which is just the craziest line because of the whole second set of figures that was never released.
They were actually in the Toy Fair catalog. So there's been pictures of them out there for a while. There's a Mike Knight in like a knight outfit. There's a Spellcaster Splinter that kind of looks like a Gandalf style figure.
We got the Wizard Splinter, which is probably my all-time favorite. That's like, people ask me, if you had to sell everything, what would be the one thing you'd keep? It's probably that guy. They released the Rocksteady and the Bebop here. They released the Dawn, and they released Leo, but not in this paint scheme.
And there was a War Cat that looks a little bit like the cat from the He-Man line. And then they were going to do a repaint of the Savage Leo with a different color hair.
When they were going to release the cat, the War Cat, they were going to repaint this guy to this color scheme. So this is the color scheme that would have came in the 2-pack with the cat, not the color scheme that was released as a single figure. I really love the Gatekeeper Rocksteady. You look at that paint on there, it's just this vibrant, like almost metallic gold. But then there's all the unreleased ones. So the War Cat we just talked about, unreleased. The Mike Knight, which here you see, this is the clay. So we talked about clays, right? That is the clay. This is the hard copy made off of this clay, right? So stage 1 here, stage 2 would be the rubber mold. Stage 3 would be this. Stage 4 would be another rubber mold. Stage 5 would be the hard copy. And here's the painted hard copy version with his shield of the Mike Knight. And the only thing I don't like about it is like the mask really doesn't hardly come up over his eyes. He almost like can't even see out.
That half of the line was totally canceled. When I started doing research, I found, some of the artists that did the 2D design, and they had some sketches of things they did, and those sketches of the Mike Knight, sketches of the Splinter.
Some artwork by the sculptor that was doing the Mike Knight from the Warriors of the Forgotten Sewer line. This was just him. They'd obviously have some kind of sketch from Playmates, but the sculptors would often do their own doodles to sort of work out the pose they wanted. So this is just some doodles he was making. Even to here you can see he's trying to work out like the different textures he wanted on the figure. Here's another one of those, even a little more rough. And some more on the back there. He's really working out like the chest details here. This is a concept for a horse that they were going to make for the Warriors of the Forgotten Sewer line. So it never came out. They had a couple different horses. There was a horse for the Metal Mutants line they actually did make. I'm guessing this horse was like something that they kept reusing and remaking. Here we've got this is packaging art for Warriors of the Forgotten Sewer. So this is a pencil. If you look on the card back, you'll see this artwork. And here's the Savage Leo. These are just color prints, but as you can see on the original comic here, it was very small and very dull. And so this is just these nice big color photocopies of all the artwork. So it's pretty cool to see these in nice big. I scanned these in and have like really high res versions of this comic now. So that's kind of cool. There's another comic, and this is kind of cool. It's a fax. Survived all these years. Sometimes these faxes, you find them and they tend to be so faded you can barely see them. But this one was clearly kept in the dark. And it's like a mock-up of this comic book, but it's a slightly different story. It's not exactly what the comic book is. You can see some panels are very similar, like this one. Has notes on it. And here's yet another version. I scanned these all in and sort of enhanced them so you can see them really well, and they're in the Rad Plastic book as well. At least some of them are. I don't think I have both of these. I can't remember. But cool to find like alternate versions, and this is like plot outlines for that comic, and there's like version 1, version 2, version 3. So they had like 4 different versions that they were considering for that comic that were typed up, like what it could be, and then they They basically roughed out two the different versions, and then before they decided on what to go with, and then that turned into the final artwork.
And there was another character, which is really seems obvious now that you think about it. It's like, in that whole line, there's no Raphael. Even in the comic book, there's no Raphael. The Mike Knight's in the comic, the Splinter's in the comic, Shredder's in the comic. There's no Raphael in the comic. So it's like really weird. But what I found is they actually did do sketches of a Raphael figure as an elf, which if they wouldn't call it Raphael, they were just not thinking at all, because that's too perfect, Raphael.
You see here this artwork, this is just a copy, but this artwork of the Raphael as an elf. And if you've ever read the little comic that comes in with the toy, there's no Raphael in that whole comic. You're like, what the heck? Why is Raphael missing? And it's because they designed this line and they didn't, they were planning on doing this guy and they canceled him, but they took Raphael is actually in some of the earlier incarnations of the comic in the story, but they took him out because they just weren't going to make him in the line for some bizarre reason. And so forever, the only thing that anybody knew was a couple sketches.
Had these sketches for a couple years, and it's like there was zero indication that this ever went any farther with the sketch. And there was one sculptor I was trying to get a hold of, and he was kind of a private guy and wouldn't return my calls. But I eventually got one of his friends who worked with him at the studio to call him up and say, hey,
I got a hold of one of the sculptors that worked there for a little bit of time. He's like, yeah, I didn't really work on much. I was kind of there at the end of the line. I'm like, well, is there anything that you had that was turtles? He's like, really only got one figure.
Yeah, there was only one figure I took because it got canceled really early. And so I just kind of snuck it home because nobody cared because it was canceled. I was like, well, what is it? And he's like, yeah, it's just like this elf character.
Like turtle is an elf. And my jaw, I already knew about this artwork and my jaw just dropped. I'm like, I can't believe this thing was sculpted.
I'm like, wait a minute, you have the elf figure? He's like, yeah, I sculpted it. He's like, I only did the rough. We didn't take it all the way to a final sculpt. But yeah, I've got the clay and I've got a hard copy of the elf figure. I'm like, dude, like you just made one of the most astounding, jaw-dropping pages in the whole book. Like, I have to get photos of this.
It is like the coolest ending to this whole Forgotten Sewer story of all these unproduced figures and this concept art. And where's Raphael and why is he not in the comic? And then turn the page and
I don't think anybody even remembered because the guys that he worked with in 4 didn't remember he did this piece because he'd barely started it. So it's just like he probably worked on it for, I don't know, maybe a week and then it was gone. And so nobody even remembered it had even happened or even started except for him. He was the only guy that knew that thing was out there.
It's not finished. This is off the clay. So he had a clay and then they canceled it. So it never even made it to the wax sculpting stage, the refined stage. So you can tell this is very rough in detail. Like you look at this one next to these two, how rough that detail is.
It's like American Pickers. I mean, if you've ever seen that show, like that's the adrenaline for me. It's, because when I have called somebody up and like, oh yeah, I worked on the line and I did this and that, and like say, hey, well, I'm gonna be wherever that person is. Can I come by and check it out? And they go, oh yeah, sure. And you go over and you go down to the basement and there's bins stacked to the ceiling. And you're like, oh my God, what's in these bins? And it's just like, start looking and you're like, oh, it's, Barbie dolls, shoot. And oh, it's leather jackets, shoot. And then, oh my God, there's a box of toys, what's in it? And you're opening things up and you're discovering and you're being surprised and you don't know what you're going to find. Like, that's the epitome for me when I go into something where I'm pretty sure there's some really great things here, but I have no idea what I'm gonna see today. And then to pull something out that's like, I can't even believe I'm holding this. Here's a figure that was unproduced. We only knew about it through artist renderings in the Toy Fair catalog and nobody knew it was even sculpted, and yet there it is. Like that like gets your heart racing. So those moments are really great. That's where I really get the vibe going. It kind of happened by accident. I was actually really more the Star Wars generation than the Ninja Turtles generation, although I really did started loving Ninja Turtles in college, really through the video game. That 4-player stand-up where the side scroller, oh man, we played the hell out of that thing when we were in college. But and I saw some of the cartoons, but I was not really a Ninja Turtle kid. But I had been collecting toys for a long time, and it was kind of by accident. I was pursuing some of the people from the Kenner Company.